Again, it's a rich thing.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to this Go programming tutorial series. In today's video, we're going to learn about all the basics. So we're going to cover a basic Hello World program, data types, variables, operators. We're going to talk about loops and if statements, and we're also going to talk about user input. So we're going to cover the very basic stuff, and then we're going to proceed to the more advanced topics as we go on. So let us get right into it. Now, I'm not going to guide you through the installation process, but I'm going to show you where you can get Go. You go to golang.org/download or /dl, or you go to the golang.org page, or you just Google Go download, whatever you want. Then you get to this page here and you can download Go for your operating system. On Linux, I think you should also be able to get it from a package manager. So either sudo apt-get install Go or pacman-s Go if you're on an Arch-based distribution. On Windows, you just download the installer, you run it, and then you just follow the very basic instructions. It's not too complicated. If there is a checkbox for adding Go to the path, make sure you check that checkbox, because otherwise you're going to have to do it yourself. You can check by opening up a command line if Go was installed successfully. You just open CMD or the terminal on Linux and you type Go. If you get this list here of Go commands, then you have successfully installed Go. Otherwise, if you get an error message like Go is not recognized as an internal or external command, operable program, or batch file, then you have not installed Go correctly. But since I made a video on how to Google your way out of problems, you can just watch that and you're going to find the installation instructions online on Stack Overflow or anywhere else. It's not too complicated. Download, install, and that's it. One more thing that you might be asking right now is which editor you should be using or which IDE you should be using for Go programming. And the answer is that there is no answer. You can use whatever editor you enjoy most. You can go with VS Code if you want. You can go with Vim. You can go with Emacs. You can go with Sublime, with Atom, with all the different editors. It doesn't really matter because in the end, you're going to use the command line with Go build and Go run to run your scripts. However, if you're interested in a professional IDE, which is like PyCharm, you can go to jetbrains.com/go and get Goland. However, Goland costs money. It doesn't have a community edition like IntelliJ or PyCharm, so you have to pay money or you have to just use it for 30 days. But Goland is not free. So if you're interested in that, you can get it, but don't expect it to be free. But this is actually the same company that produces PyCharm and IntelliJ, so maybe depending on how seriously you want to take Go, that might be a good choice. I'm going to use Goland here, but as I said, it doesn't really matter. I'm using it because from my university I have a free account here and I can get the pro version of Goland without paying any money, at least for some time as long as I'm studying in university. But you can choose, as I said, whatever you want. I would recommend something like VS Code or Vim because those have a lot of different plugins that you can install there. All right, so let us get started by creating a .go file. We're going to the directory that we want to code in and we just press new Go file, or wherever you are, you just create a new .go file and we're going to call this main.go. The name of the file is not too important, but the name of the package and the name of the function is very important because if the package does not have the exact name main, then it's not going to be runnable. We can only execute the main package and also only the main function. So what we need to do down here is function main. This is how you create a main function that is also runnable. Now in Goland, you can see that you have this green arrow here, but we can also open up the terminal and navigate to, actually we are in the directory already. So we can go ahead and say go run main.go. Now, of course, we don't have any functionality yet, but if I rename this package to anything else, like Neural 9, for example, you're going to see that if I run this, it says go run cannot run a non-main package. The package has to be called name if you want to run it, and also the function has to be called main, because otherwise if I call this ABC, for example, it's also not going to be runnable because it says runtime function main is undeclared in the main package. So main function in the main package, that's the entry point of the program. That is the first thing that you need to know about Go. So let's do a basic Hello World program to see how we actually output something. In order to output something onto the screen, we need to say fmt.println like that, and we need to say hello world. Now fmt needs to be imported, so what we do is we go up here and say import fmt like that. then it works. By the way, let me just increase the font size here because you guys love complaining about the font size. So I'm going to just size this up to, I don't know, something like 28, maybe. There you go. Let me just see if I'm not blocking anything. Looks fine. There you go. Okay. So this is how you do a basic Hello World program. We can run this here. By the way, whenever I click this arrow of Goland, you can just go into the terminal and say go run. So you can say go run main.go. And you can see that you get Hello World down here. And if I press this button here, it's also going to do the same thing. So we don't need, you don't need to use Goland in order to just run the script. You just say go run, and you can run the file. Now, if you want to compile it into an executable, so if you don't want to have this Go file here, but you want to have a .exe file, for example, you go into the terminal and you say go build main.go. And by saying go build main.go, as we see here, we have a main.exe file, and I can just go ahead and call main.exe, and it's going to do the exact same thing. So hello world. This is how you compile a Go program. So this is a very basic stuff here. By the way, one thing that's interesting about the Go programming language is that it's going to delete things that are not useful. So if I import something that I haven't used here, so for example, import time, and I save the file, it's going to tell me that this is not good because I'm not using the import. Now in Python or Java, it's just going to say, I don't care, you're not using this, but you're not causing any harm. In Go, it's going to say, if I go ahead and do go run main.go, it's not going to allow me to compile this because I'm using something, I'm not using something that I imported, and this is not allowed in the Go language. And I'm not sure why it's not doing it right now, but usually Goland, but also other editors like Vim, for example, are just going to delete the imports. So this is also something that you need to keep in mind here. Go is very safe. It's not going to allow you to do stupid things, which is also the case for variables. And we're going to talk about variables right now. In order to define a variable in Go, you can say var, this is a keyword, and you can say, for example, a equals, and then I can say hello. Now you might say this is dynamic typing, but it's not dynamic typing. It is implicit typing. I'm not sure if that's even the right term. It's automatically typing it, but it's not at all dynamic because this here is a string. Just because I don't write that it's a string doesn't mean that it is not a string. It is a string, but it's automatically a string because it recognizes this as a string. So if I go ahead and I print this, let me just see what the function was. Yeah, in order to print the type of a variable, we can go ahead and say fmt.println, and we can say reflect.value of a, and as you can see, it's automatically importing reflect. So if you want to use reflect.value of, or actually we're not using value of, sorry, we're using type of. In order to use this, you need to import reflect, and if you want to import multiple things, you can say import fmt, import reflect, or you can just say import, and inside of these parentheses here, you can just list all the modules that you want to import. So if I now run this, you're going to see that this is going to be a string, even though we didn't state that it is a string. So you can see we get string as a result here. And this is not dynamical typing because I cannot just go ahead and say a equals 10 right now, because it's going to say 10 is not a string. And if I change this to another string, that's perfectly fine, so we don't get any errors here, but I cannot change the type. So this is definitely statically typed, but it's automatically typed. Now, this is not the only way to do that. By the way, first of all, let me show you. If we do var b equals 10 and we change this here to b, you're going to see that this is an integer. What do we have here? Yeah, a is declared but not used. As I said, if you declare something and you don't use it, you're going to get an error. It's not like in Python or Java where it says, okay, unused, but it says, no, you cannot compile because you didn't use a. It's unnecessarily defined or declared. So as you can see, b is an integer, and you can do the same thing for floats and for other data types. One thing that's important is if you want to specify the data type for some reason, you can do it by saying var b, and then I can specify int. Now, if I do this, it's going to say type can be omitted, so I don't need to pass the type because it's automatically going to be an integer. But if I change this, for example, to int 8, which is a separate type, so we have, I think we have int 8, I think we have int 16, 32, 64, and so on. This refers to the bytes. So if I want to have a special int type, I have to specify it, because then it's not going to be an integer, it's going to be an integer 8, which is a different data type. It's still integer, but with a different size. So this is how you can specify the types. And you can do the same thing with float 32 or 64, because I think by default it's 32. So if you want a 64, you need to specify that it is a 64 float. So what you can also do is you can define variables in a different way. You can say x, and then you need to use this walrus operator, I think it's called, at least in Python, and you can say x is 10. This is what you do if you do it for the first time. So let me show you. If I now go ahead and print x, we're going to get that x is 10. So this is also a valid definition, and it's going to also be an integer. It's going to automatically type x. But if I now want to change the value of x, I don't have to use the same operator here. So I cannot go ahead and say x equals 20, because it's going to say x is already defined. It says no new variables on the left side, because x is already defined up here. If you want to change the value, we don't use this operator. We just use the basic assignment operator, because we're changing. This is only for the initial definition. If you want to define a new variable, you do it like that. So this is one way that you can do it. And before we move on with the next topic, I'm going to also show you how to define constants. If you want to have a constant, you say, for example, const pi equals, and then you can just choose a value for pi. And then we can print this, obviously. That's not a problem. But you're going to see in a second that we cannot change pi. So we can use pi for whatever we want, but I cannot say pi equals something else, because we can see here that cannot assign to pi, and what we have here, what is this? Cannot be represented by untyped float. Okay, maybe this is also a problem with the number here. Does this work? Doesn't really matter. However, we cannot assign to pi in any way, because pi is a constant. This is the definition of a constant. It cannot change its value. And of course, I'm not sure if in Go the typing convention or the name conventions are the same, but usually you use capital letters for constants, so it would be like that. But I'm not sure if that's also the case in Go, because languages differ in the conventions, but this is how you would do it with the uppercase convention. All right, so let's talk about the next topic, which is operators. So we're going to delete that. By the way, one thing that I want to mention here is that booleans are defined like that. So you have true or false with a lowercase t and a lowercase f. So that is false. In Python, you have uppercase f and uppercase t. In Go, you have lowercase everything. So this is how you define booleans. And operators are actually the same in Go as in any other language. You have the basic logical operators. So for example, if you have something like fmt.println, print line, and we want to say true and true, then this is going to be true, because that's a logical AND. As you can see, it already says this is always going to be true. True and true can be simplified to true. Now we can copy that, and we can change this to false, and we can change this to OR. So this is how you do an OR. Now in Python, you don't use and this symbol, but you use the actual keywords and OR. But in all other major languages like Java, C++, C#, you use these operators. So this means logical AND, this means logical OR. Then let's go ahead and say false. And we can also use the negation operator, which is not false. For example, this is going to be true. So we can go ahead and print this, and you're going to see that this is the case. So we should get true, false, true, true, false. True, sorry, of course, because we're negating false. So those are the basic logical operators. We also have the basic assignment operators. So we can say, as I said, this is the initial assignment operator. So this is the definition or the declaration of A. But if we want to change the value, we say A equals 20 or A equals 30 and so on. We also have the basic arithmetic operators. So if I say fmt.println and I go with 10 plus 20, I can do the same thing with minus and divided by. We also have the modulo operator. So the very basic stuff that we have in all the different languages. And one thing that we don't have in Python, but we have in Go, is the increment and the decrement operators. So if I have a variable a which is 0, and I want to print that, so I say fmt println a. And before that, what I do is I say, first of all, I can say a equals a plus 1. That is obviously one way to do it. But we can also say, as we said in Python, plus equals 1. But what we can also do in Go is we can just say plus plus, which is what we can do in languages like C, C++, Java, and C#, for example, which basically just means incremented. So this is actually a post increment. I'm not sure if Go also supports a pre-increment, which would be plus plus a, but I don't know why it should not. Oh, it doesn't actually. Okay, so we can only have the post increment here, so we can only say a plus plus. In other languages, the difference is that if I pass a plus plus, it's actually going to print a, and it's going to increase it afterwards, whereas if I say plus plus a, it's going to first increase it and then it's going to print a, but maybe in Go that's just not supported. Same can be done, by the way, with a minus minus for decrement, so this is going to decrease the value of a by 1. And of course, the operators can be combined with assignment operators, so the arithmetic operators can be combined with assignment operators. Plus equals 10, or minus equals 5, or times equals 2. So in this case, we would have 10, then 5, then 2, which is 10 again, times 2, which is 10 again. So we have fmt.println a, and we should get 10. Because we're first adding 10 to 0, subtracting 5, which results in 5, and then multiplying by 2, which results in 10, as you can see. So those are the very basic operators that we also have in Go, like in any other language. Again, the difference to Python is that we have an increment and a decrement, and we also have this special initial assignment operator here. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about user input. How do we get input from the user during runtime? This is actually quite simple. First of all, we define a variable. Let's say we have my input, and this is going to be an integer, and we're going to leave it undefined, and then we're going to say fmt.println, and we're going to say please enter a number, and then we're going to ask for the user input, and we do that by calling the function fmt.scan, actually just scan. And now we need to reference this my input variable, and we're not going to talk about pointers yet or referencing yet, but in order to make this possible, we need to pass this and symbol here and my input. So we cannot just pass my input, but we have to pass this operator here and my input. And we're going to talk about this operator later on in the series, but for now, just accept that this is the case, and then we can go ahead and say fmt println and or actually let's do printf, because that is a formatted string, and we can say, okay, your number was, and then we can say %d for the formatting. And what we want to do is we want to format my input. So that is it. We can run this, and you're going to see that this hopefully works. There you go. Please enter a number, 99. Your number was 99. So that is how you get some basic input in Go. We can continue from here to the conditions. They're not going to be very interesting or special, because they're going to be the exact same as in any other language. We have an if statement, we have an else if statement, and we have an else statement. So if basically means if the condition that follows this if statement is true, then go into that block. Then we have an else, which is otherwise go here, and an else if is an else with another if statement. So in comparison to Python, we don't have an elif statement. We just use else if, which is the same effect. So for example, we can say if my input is less than 100, like that. Now we use curly brackets here. In Python, we use a colon. In most other languages, we use curly braces. We also don't need to use any parentheses here, so we don't need to say if in parentheses. This is unnecessary. We can just go ahead and say if my input less than 100, Then we're going into this block and we're going to say fmt.println less than 100, for example. Then we can say else if it's not less than 100, but it is less than 200, for example, then we're going to just copy that. Oh, I copied too much. There you go. Less than 200. And otherwise, we're just going to say too large or something like that. So that's a basic if-else tree. Of course, we can also have ifs inside of ifs, so I can just open up a new if here. But that's not too complicated. It's the same as in all the other languages, so we're just going to have this basic if-else structure. And we're going to see that if I pass 10, we're going to get your number was 10, less than 100. By the way, here we should probably add a \n for a line break. So less than 100 was the response. Then we can go ahead and enter something like 190. It's going to say less than 200. And if I enter another number that is too large, like that, it's going to say too large. So that's a basic if-else structure. What we also have in Go is we have switch case. If you're coming from Java, C#, C++, you already know what switch case is. For those of you who only know Python, switch case might be new, but it's not very complicated. It's basically similar to an if statement. What you do is you say switch and you pass the variable that is going to be the object of this switch case tree, you could say. So in this case, we can say my input. And then we're going to have different cases for the value of my input. So we're going to say switch my input. We're going to have these curly brackets here. And then we're going to have the individual cases. So one case could be my input is going to be 10. And in this case, we're going to say fmt.println 10 was your input, for example. And in another case, we might have 20, and then we're just going to copy that, and we're going to say 20 was your input, and so on. So it's the same thing as saying if my input equals 10, do this. If my input equals 20, do this. If my input equals something else, do this. So it's like if else, but in a different way. We have this switch, we have this variable in here that can be a string, it can be an integer, it can be a type, and then we have the different cases. And if the case happens that my input is 10, we're going to go into that block here. Now, notice that even that we're not coding in Python, we still have this colon here with the indentation. This is also the case in other languages like Java, C++, and so on. This is just how switch case usually is structured. And what happens if no case is fulfilled? Then we can default to a default case. So we can say default equals, and here we can just pass can just print, I don't know, something else. Now the problem that it is not indented correctly. There you go. And this is the basic switch case structure. So if I now go ahead and input the number 10, you're going to see 10 was your input. If I now input the number 20, you're going to see 20 was your input. And if I input another number, you're going to see something else. So this is how a switch case conditional tree works. So last but not least for today's video, let's talk about loops. And Go makes this very simple for us because in other languages we would have to talk now about the differences between a while loop, between a for loop, between a do while loop. In Go, we only have for loops. So for those of you who come from other programming languages, you know that a while loop, what it basically does is it has some conditions. So while condition, and then you have a block of code that is executed while this condition is true. So you could have something like you have a variable, and as long as this variable is less than 100, increase this variable by 1, and once it reaches 100, this condition is going to return false, and we're going to break out of this loop. We can do the same thing in Go, but by using the for keyword. So here we don't use while, we use a for loop with the exact same functionality. So we have for condition, and it has the exact same functionality, which means that if I say for true, it's going to be an endless or infinite for loop, as you can see. But let's do it differently. Let's say we have x is 0. And then we say for x is less than 10, we are going to say x++ fmt dot println x, for example. So I think we imported the wrong module here. There you go. So what we have here is we say x is 0, as long as x is less than 10, increase it by 1, and then print out the value of x. So this is a basic while loop in other languages with the for keyword being used here. So this is one way to do it. And what we can also do here is we can use a classic for loop as we know it from other languages, which is basically for, and then we initialize something or we specify something. So for x being 0, then semicolon, as long as x is less than 100, with each iteration increase x by 1, and then the block of code. So this is a classic for loop as we know it from Java and from C++. The first part is the initialization, x is something, as long as x is less than something, or as long as this condition is met, do something, in this case increase x by 1, and we can just go ahead fmt.println x, and you're going to see that we're going to print 100 digits here, as you can see, from 0 to 99. So this is the classic for loop. We can also have a for each, but we're going to talk about that when we get to collections and when we get to the range keyword, because in Python you don't have this kind of for loop. We have something like for x in range, and this is also something that we can do in Go. So the range keyword is something that we also know in Go, but we're going to talk about that when we come to collections. So this is how you do basic loops in Go. So that's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video, and bye.